All right, we're going to go back in time, way back, to an era that's often called Jahiliyya, or the Age of Ignorance. But what if I told you that name is, well, kind of misleading? Today, we're going to unpack just how complex, and believe it or not, how advanced pre-Islamic Arabia really was. So, when you hear Age of Ignorance, what pops into your head? Come on, be honest. For most of us, it's probably an image just like this, right? A huge, empty desert. Maybe a lonely figure with a camel. It all feels very primitive, very simple. And look, it's a powerful image for sure, but it is so far from the whole story. And this is where that common myth just completely starts to fall apart. On one side, you have the stereotype, a primitive, lawless society of nomads. But the reality? Mecca was a buzzing global trade hub, doing business with massive empires like the Byzantines and Sasanians. It was in the middle of a golden age of poetry and was actually run by a surprisingly organized council. And I'm not talking about some informal get-together. This was legit. The city was governed by a council called the Dar al-Nadwa, and each of the major families had a very specific job. Think of them like modern government ministries. So you had the Banu Hashim. They handled water for all the pilgrims coming to the city. The Banu Umayyah, they were in charge of military command. The Banu Adi handled foreign relations. This was a complex city-state, and it was organized. And their culture was just as sophisticated. Poetry. I mean, for them, poetry was everything. It was their highest art form. They held these huge annual competitions, and the winning poems, the absolute masterpieces known as the mu'allaqat, were considered so brilliant they were literally written out in gold ink and hung on the walls of the Kaaba itself, their most sacred place. Just think about that. This was a society that put art and literature right at the center of their spiritual world. Okay, so this brings us to the big, obvious question, right? If they had a complex government, a thriving economy, and this incredible literary culture, why on earth do we call this the Age of Ignorance? What exactly were they supposed to be ignorant of? And here it is. This is the key to the whole thing. The term Jahiliyya doesn't mean they lacked knowledge or wealth or culture. The ignorance it's talking about is a spiritual one. It describes a condition, a state of being cut off from divine guidance, from revelation. It wasn't about being unintelligent. It was about being spiritually disconnected. So what did that spiritual disconnect actually look like? Well, it really boils down to three core flaws. The first was shirk, or idolatry. The second was zulm, which is a system of injustice where might makes right. And the third was a profound, chilling hardness of heart. Let's break each of those down. Let's start with this number, 360. Just let that sink in. That's how many idols were kept inside and around the Kaaba. Now, they did believe in a supreme god, but they worshipped all these other idols as intermediaries. One for this tribe, one for that particular need, another for a good harvest. And you have to understand, this wasn't just about faith. It was about finance. The annual pilgrimage, with people from all over the peninsula coming to see these 360 idols, it fueled Mecca's entire economy. Religion was big business. So when the Prophet Muhammad arrived with a message of pure monotheism, one God, he wasn't just challenging their beliefs. He was threatening to tear down their entire economic system. Among those hundreds of idols, three were considered the headliners: Lat, Uzza, and Manat. They were often called the daughters of God and were revered everywhere. And here's a strange paradox for you. In a society that often devalued female life, as we're about to see, their most powerful and important deities were feminine. And that brings us right to the second core flaw, zulm, or injustice. In the world of Jahiliyya, there was no concept of universal justice. The only law that mattered was the law of your tribe. And the only thing that guaranteed your rights was the strength of that tribe. This system created a brutal reality. Your tribe was everything, your protector, your family, your safety net, and it would defend you whether you were right or totally in the wrong. That meant the strong always won, no matter the truth. And the most vulnerable people, the weak, the orphans, the slaves, they were just systematically exploited. To be exiled, to be cast out from your tribe, was basically a death sentence. Which leads us to the third, and honestly the most disturbing flaw, a profound hardness of heart. And nothing illustrates this more chillingly than the practice of female infanticide. Now, this wasn't happening in every single family, but it was common enough to be a defining feature of the era's moral decay. I just want you to take a moment and really absorb this account. A father, fearing poverty or the shame of having a daughter who might be captured in a tribal raid, would take his own child, often just a little girl, to a pit he'd already dug in the desert, and he'd push her in alive. And the most haunting part, he would just go back home and continue with his day. This is the ultimate example of a heart that has been completely sealed off from mercy. So why does digging all this up matter now? Well, because as we've seen, Jahiliyya wasn't just a period in time. It's a condition that can exist outside of time. It's a spiritual state. And that's what makes its lessons so incredibly urgent and timeless. You know, one of early Islam's most important figures, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he said it best. He said, "The one who does not know Jahiliyya cannot understand Islam." It's like, you can't truly appreciate the light unless you understand the darkness it dispelled. You have to see what the world was like before to really grasp the radical transformation that Islam brought. And that brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. If Jahiliyya is a timeless condition, the state of being disconnected from a higher purpose, then it can exist in any era, including our own. It really forces us to ask, what are the idols of the modern age? What are the things, wealth, status, ideology, even our own desires, that we place at the very center of our lives, the things that end up shaping our sense of right and wrong? It's a question worth reflecting on.